Everyone, this is Sudhindra Singh from Coding Ninjas, and in this video, we are going to learn about Angular. So, we'll be doing introduction to Angular in this video, and this video comprises of different parts, starting from the introduction to the Angularjs. Then we'll be probably moving to the installing Angular in our PC, and we'll see what are the tools required to install it on over here. Then we'll move to some other features like what are the components in AngularJS, what is data binding, and directives. Now, AngularJS is a JavaScript framework for building UIs, and by UI means whatever components we see in over here. So we have, let's say, the snap bar and the sidebar, this main section. So all these comprises of an complete UI. Also, we'll be talking about single page application, how Angular helps creating single page, multi-page application, and then we'll be probably moving to the features of modularity like highly optimized router mobile apps. So these are the common features we get when we use AngularJS. Now requirements to study AngularJS is ES6, TypeScript, and HTML, CSS. So even if you are new to TypeScript, it won't take much time to learn, because it's in the end, like, it's similar to the object oriented programming concept if you are familiar with Java or C++. Moving on, we'll be discussing about components. Like, we'll discuss what are the components in AngularJS and how we create a reusable UI to make our complete application. Finally, we may take up some examples and we'll start. So, starting our lecture with a introduction to Angular. Now, Angular was developed by Google, and the purpose of Angular was to create UI which is robust, reusable, component based, and dynamic in nature. Now, this would help us. So, we'll see some of the data, like how this is going to help us. All right, so let's just get started with what is a single page application. Now, if we talk about the traditional HTML, if we talk about traditional HTML, which was being used in earlier days, so what happened is there's a server, a server, and there's a client. Now, what was being done here is the client tries to request for a page, let's say a page one, and maybe this is the home page of that website, and server used to respond with some traditional HTML. Let's say maybe it's the home page which is being served to the client. Now, on any interaction with the web page, client would send a request again, and server would reply back with another HTML page. Let's say this time it requested for the product page, and server serves the product page to the client. So we see that every time a new request was sent in over here, so a new HTML page was generated and sent back to the client. Now, moving on. So uh, how is this different between? So how is this different? So how is this different from the single page application, and or how is Angular going to help us in dealing with this? So when we talk about single page application, so instead returning separate HTMLs, this is what happens. Now, here's a server again which is serving the HTML file, and here's the client which is going to share the data. Then we have the server and we have the client. Now, client tries to request for a page. So the first request is has to go. So let's say that home page is being requested from the client to the server. This time, home page or the main root page is sent back to the client, and this is what we have received. Now, in any user interaction, let's say that product page data is needed or any other data is needed. This time, the request goes for the product page. This time, the request goes for the product page. Now, instead of sending a complete new HTML to us, what is being sent to us is maybe any kind of data format. Let's say that it's a JSON data is being sent to us. Okay, and this JSON data would be used in our same HTML file we're having to generate another page, let's say a product page, or let's say info page or any career page. Covered the introduction to Angular part. It's time we see how we can install Angular on our PC and create an Angular project. The first requirement to install Angular on our PC is to install Node.js, and if we go to, so this is the website for Node.js. This is nodejs.org, and it is easily available out there. Downloads, so it's, since it's cross platform supported, so there's an uh, installer for every kind of operating system which we can go through. Since I have already installed it, it's a simple installable. Since I have already installed it, I can verify the installation. I can simply say something like this, node minus v, and it would give me the version which verifies is that we have already installed node in our machine. All right. Once we are done with the installation, now we are going to install what is called as Angular CLI. Angular CLI is the command line interface which is going to help us install Angular on our machine, and by default it will be giving up some projects, some files which we need to work on to develop our Angular application. So in order to install an Angular CLI, once a successful installation of Node.js has been performed, we need to install the Angular CLI. The CLI says that it's a CLI tool for Angular for running Angular commands on our machine. So you can just copy the command from here, and you can do the same thing. So choose any terminal, or maybe let's go to our VS Code and run our command. We can simply say the command with a sudo. Since we are going to make it a global install, what is a global install? So when you want to install a package globally, which means that the command you want to make it available throughout your machine, so you put a -g flag in over here and just install it globally. Now I want that from any folder I can access Angular commands. So it says that it has successfully installed. Now I can create our first Angular project, and the command for that is ng new, and whatever the name of the application we want to choose, we can put in over here. So we can say that ng new my app, and it will ask some couple of commands need to answer. Okay, it will ask for styling, and we can see that it has been adding up lots of files in over here, which is the create command, and we could get in over here. So let's see where is the thing being installed. And now once our project has been successfully installed, let's go to the files of these project. So this is called the boilerplate code, where Angular gives us some folders and files inside them, and these files and folders are our Angular code is stored, and these will be what we are going to be editing in order to generate a new application. So the first file we see over here is a Typescript file, so which says which files to include, and the conversion of Typescript to JavaScript later in over here. So this is the compilation part of Typescript, and it says what should be the JavaScript output files and where to store it and other configurations in over here. The same is related with, so whatever related with the tsconfig files is related to the working and the compilation of Typescript files. We also have a README file which exactly tells how to install this application, how to run this, how to build this application, test, and other features. Package JSON. So as other JavaScript applications or Node applications, we have a package JSON. It tells what are the packages installed, what are the dependencies, what are the developer dependencies installed in this application. Dependencies are the codes which is written by other developers, which we use in our project. Now, we also have package log JSON. So if you are not familiar with package log JSON, so it takes it holds all the information about the packages or the dependencies in our system and their updated versions inside it. Then we have a file which would be basically, in order to test our application, we have this comma.conf js file. Then we have Angular JSON file. So JSON file, it stores all the information about an application, what is the project type, then what is the source root, what is the prefix we want to have to our components, and we'll talk about components more. This is a git ignore file, editor config. Most of the time we will be spending, so most of the time we'll be doing our job in this source app itself. Inside the source application, so we have the first application in over here, which is for the testing of our application. Then we have the style css for adding styles throughout our application. So if there is any main style we want to apply it throughout an application, we can add that style in over here. Comes polyfills. So polyfills are added in this in order to make this Angular app available to or compatible to all the browsers, even if they are a bit old. Main.ts is the main file of our application. So main.ts is the first file which goes into execution, the source folder whenever we want to open our application. So we'll talk about the functions more, but let's see this index.html. So if you see till now in our complete source folder, this is the only index.html file we are having, which is basically having the syntax or the template of our application. We see HTML tag, head tag, body, and lots of tags are familiar with, except this app root tag, which we are going to see. Here's an app folder over here. Inside this, we find couple of files. Now, that was a quick walkthrough of our application, how Angular project looks. Let's talk about the features and then we'll get back to the code itself and do some editing and let's see how it works. There's a feature of modularity which we have in our Angular application. So what are modules in an JavaScript? What is modules? So what are modules in JavaScript? So any JavaScript file is called a module if it shares its features or functions outside that file. Now, a complete Angular application is made up of different components where we import or export them in order to be used outside the in order to be used by another component or another file. So if you import something, so if you are basically saying that I want to use the code in my current file, highly optimized since Angular, um, since we are creating different components, and every time there's a change in our application, the small component is being changed, so it is highly optimized. We also have router support. Okay, so we'll be talking about routers when we develop multi-page applications, when we have more than one URLs for our application. Next is components in Angular. Now, what are components in Angular? So, it's the part of UI at any given instant, and it's a reusable UI which makes our entire application. So, components, as per the definition, it says it's a part of UI at any given instant, reusable UI which makes our entire application. For our coding ninjas page, if you just have a quick look, so this is what we have got. And if you just analyze, so I can divide this complete application in different components. I can see that this sidebar is a kind of component which we have in over here. The sidebar is kind of component. Then we have this main section as a component in over here. And maybe this sidebar can also be considered as a component. Now, inside this is a list of courses I have. So this is a list of courses I have. So there's a separate component. These are tabs or maybe the navigation tabs, which are the separate components in over here. And we have the message components. We have the message components we have in over here. Angular let us develop these independent component which are being reusable in different parts of our application. Now, this is one thing which separates its or gives its advantage over traditional HTML projects. It's time we see through the code how we can create our different components and how does it look. All right, going through the code, so we can see that there are some files which are already generated, and which one of them are this app component, which is basically the main component in our Angular application. So if we just go through this app, we see there are some styles added in over here. Now, this is the boilerplate code which I didn't write. This is auto-generated by Angular itself. Now we find that we do not have the HTML body structure. Instead, we have this style tag and there's a couple of div tags. Inside that, we have Angular span and other tags. All right. So how exactly is this tag being used? And we find couple of CSS files which we can see later on. Then we have this app routing models. Routing means like creating different routes to support different URLs in our application, so which we can see later part. Coming to this app module file, so this is the module file which is basically enabling our template code or the HTML code to be shared with the main HTML application. We'll talk about this in detail, but we need to understand that this app routing component will be sharing this. So sharing the data with our component. Now we have something called as the component.ts file. In component.ts file, we have something called as this component decorator. So we'll talk about decorators in a minute. It holds the URL of my file or the app component or the template file, which is basically the main component in over here. It also holds the styling file, which is the CSS file for my app component, and it then saves the data. For example, so the data being used in our application, since our application is being, there's an spec file and which exactly contains the test cases written for my application, and we can cover the testing part later on, but this is related to testing. Comes the HTML file in over here. If you see that the data, so there were two separate variables in over here, and which is a property of this app component to be exact, in exact manner. So this is the title and subtitle, which both holds a string, and we can see that this is being used in over here. So if you want to add another application or another variable in over here, we can use that too. So let's quickly run our application and see what's the command to run it, and then we can move forward. So just go to the boilerplate code, go to the project directory, and the command in order to run the Angular application is ngserve. It will take some time to build it, and once on the successful building, we'll have our application ready at localhost 42,000. So we can open our browser. Instead of going on this, we can say 2000, and this is what our Angular app looks like in the beginning. Now these codes are already present, so if you just have a quick look, if you just have a quick look to this component file, and we can see that there's an welcome text written in over here, which contains different anchor tags in over here. Then we have couple of other SVGs attached. We have our title and subtitle. So where is this being rendered? Let's see it in our page. So if you just go through the browser and we check our tag in over here, it says first app, it says app is running and adding a subtitle. We just saw that in our component.ts file, we have made this change. Now I can pass something else. So maybe we can just say the subtitle and we see that is being auto reloaded. So this is one of the good features of using Angular in over here. We get an auto refresh, and finally we see that there's a change in our file, and we do not need to reload on our own. All right. So this is a normal component, which is the main component in over here in Angular, and we just saw that. In the next part, what we'll be doing is we'll be adding our own component in AngularJS, and that will be an independent component. Let's see how we are going to do that. Angular offers a feature or a command we can say, which is a CLI command. It says that if you want to generate a component, write the command ng generate and type in component over here. So we have lots of things can be directly generated by Angular. So we'll say that we want to generate a component, and maybe we can pass the component name. Let's say that we want to create an about component, and we hit enter. We will be getting up. About component has been generated, so it is a folder containing all the different files in over here, and we see that the first is component.ts file. Inside this we have the selector. Where do we use the selector? How is the selector used? We'll just see that. Then we have the template URL of our component HTML page, which is basically the template about, and we'll be adding our code inside this for the about component. This is a CSS file which is generated to add CSS specific to our HTML file which is being loaded. We can talk about this constructor and ng on init thing. So ng on init would be the function we want to run when the component gets loaded, but we can take this part in some other lectures. Also, this is the test file which is being generated. Finally, we have this over here. So it says that we have a symbol p tag which says about, which is the component name, and it says it has added works in over here. Now we can change this file or add some other text to it. Maybe I can say that about component loaded or something. So I can say that component about component loaded. We can see that there's a refresh in over here. All right. This is a CSS file, so we can leave it for now. Let's see, is our component loaded and how does it look? So if I try to go in over here and I try to see in over here, so we do not find our component which we just generated. And why is that? Let's see and let's try to fix it and learn what are we missing in over here. For this about component or the template to load in our file, we need to add it to our main component, which is basically our app component. And if we go on over here, so this is modules. Now modules take care of the shared code or the shared template. Now at the same component about component, I want to share the data, I want to share the template, the data with my complete application. So we need to add it in the declaration of this ng module decorators. So what are decorators? We'll be talking about them in some other part, but yeah, this is how it works. So we need to import it, the component is imported, and this is what we have. All right, what are the other changes needed? So we need to go to this about component and we need to get the selector which we have added. The selector is auto generated and we can change it if we want. Basically, we do not change it. We put the app prefix and we say about. Now this, if we want this app about to load it along with our main app component, I can add it anywhere I want, anywhere in my app component I want. Maybe I can add it the above or maybe add it below. It's totally on our choice. Now I can say that if I want to load this app component. So all right, so we see that we have added our app about component somewhere in the file before the resources. Let's go to the browser and check out what we're getting. So we see that about component loaded is being displayed over here. Now let's have a look to the source code, what we are having in over here. So if I just go to the source code or the page source, what we get is this thing. Now we have this app root in over here, and we have, so this is the only app root tag which you see in our body. So this is the only thing in over here. Now how does this work? Let's see. So where is app root located in over here? That's the question. And if we just go through our app component, which is our main component in over here, so we see the app root selector in over here. Every component we have created apart from that has been added inside this app root itself. So this is what it is being served to the server. So if you go to index.html, so this is what we are having. Now this app component receives, now this app component receives the template or the DOM from the other two components we have added, which is the home component in over here and the about component in over here. Now, in order to share this home and about component, we need to call that or use those components in over here, which is basically saying that they want to use the data stored in over here. And we use a selector defined for them in their components file, respective components files in over here. So just a quick look of the files we are having. For a single component, there are four things existing in over here. So for a single component, for a single component in Angularjs, this is what we have. For a single component in Angularjs, this is what we have. So first of all, we have this module file. First of all, we have the module file, which stores all the modules required for this application. So all the modules required for the particular component. Then comes the second file, which is basically component.ts file, which comes the component.ts file, component.ts file holds info about, holds information about, holds info about the template URL, CSS for that template, and the selector name, which is being used in the main component or any other sub component in order to use the template itself. Apart from this one, we have the HTML file, HTML file or the template file itself, the CSS file which is over there for the template, and the test file for that template. So these are the 5 files which are stored in over here. All right. So this is what we had for the introductory lecture.